She dressed me up for Halloween, went Christmas shopping. When she'd pull me uptown for candy, she would always get the black licorice and get me the red. Just a wonderful big sister. I mean, there was 9 years between us, so she was like a second mom.
The date was November 13, 1960. Paulding, Ohio, a town of 2,300 residents.
My name is Cheryl Garza, and I am a sister of Nancy. And I was with her on November 13th, 1960.
This was beautiful back in the day. And all these beautiful lights under here. And then the sidewalk had like little sparkles in them.
You know, Cheryl and Nancy are walking home ultimately from the movie theater in downtown Paulding. They stop and have some drinks at a local restaurant a couple blocks away, and then they start the walk home, which is maybe equivalent to 4 or 5 town blocks.
So as we was walking around the corner there, she was holding my hand, and I noticed a car behind us going real slow. And I remember looking over my shoulder, and I looked back at her and I said, "Nancy, I think someone's following us."
As they're near their residence, a vehicle pulls up to them, described as a dark-colored 4-door vehicle.
Right in here, a little ways is where he started asking if we wanted to ride.
And he rolled his window down and he said, "Would you girls like a ride home?" And Nancy said, "No, thank you, we're almost there." And he just kind of creeped along with us as we walked. And he said it again, "Would you girls like a ride home?" She said, "No, thank you, we're almost there."
He ultimately parks the vehicle on the road, gets out, grabs a hold of Nancy, ultimately abducts her, throws her into the vehicle.
They were in the back seat, and then he's in here like this. And I couldn't see what he was doing, so I jumped on his back, and he just went like this and pushed me to the ground.
So when I fell back on the ground, I just realized that this is a bad man. This is not a good man. I jumped up, ran up to the neighbor's house. It was Mrs. Larson, and she would babysit for me once in a while, so I knew him well. And I knocked on the door, and I kept watching the car, and he was just fumbling around in his pockets and everything. And when she finally came to the door, he had just closed her door. But as he did, I seen her in the back seat setting up with her head laying on the back seat of the car, like she was out. She was knocked out.
And seconds later, 14-year-old Nancy Eagleson was gone. Years after the abduction, Nancy's mother, Betty, wrote a letter about her teenage daughter.
For several months, I had been begged and pleaded with for some high heels like the other girls were wearing. She knew we couldn't afford the added luxury right now, but she also knew she would get them in time to come. As usual, like all mothers do, I gave in to her pleading. On November 12, 1960, she purchased her first high heels. The next day would be Sunday, and her first chance to trip around in her clackety-clack shoes.
Sunday morning, like all Sunday mornings for the family, was spent in church.
After services, the girls had missed their ride home. They decided that it would be fun walking such a short distance. Nancy, thinking that missing her ride meant she was unlucky, she stated to a friend that it must be her unlucky day, noting that it was the 13th of the month.
The girls made it home from church, but after seeing a double feature later in the day, the world exploded for the Eagleson family. Nancy's body was found just hours after she was abducted near her home.
And I remember sitting in my dad's lap, and they just, "Mr. and Mrs. Eagleson, we're sorry to tell you, but we found your daughter, and she is dead." And my dad jumped up, and they had to restrain him, of course. But I didn't realize exactly what happened, what it all meant. And finally, they had to explain to me, I'm never going to see her again. She's gone.
The assailant, after he abducted Nancy, drove about 7 miles or so towards the city of Defiance, just about to Junction, Ohio, and pulled just off of State Route 111, maybe a quarter mile. The road State Route 111 takes a 90-degree turn. This person went straight onto what's County Road 176. And just about a quarter-mile down, there's a woods there that today many people call Nancy's Woods. And it's on the south side of the road, and ultimately that's where her body was found several hours after the abduction.
62 years, the emotion is still strong.
You know, I'd never see my sister again. It's so hard because I've, over the years, I've always blamed myself. Because I was the last one to see her, besides the man that killed her.
Betty Eagleson died in 2018. She died without answers.
She was a loyal Girl Scout, an average freshman, Cheryl's big sister. Her second mother would never roam the street again and shop at Christmas for the right present for us, her family. I miss her so.
In the days, weeks, and years ahead, investigators hunt for a killer, and somewhere along the line, all the evidence disappears.
That will always forever be one of the issues that even I, again, who wasn't alive in 1960, had nothing to do with this, will have a black eye because this evidence is missing.
She was brutally murdered. The manner in which she was killed was violent.
It was October 1977.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear that I
Jimmy
will
Carter
faithfully
was
execute
president.
Thousands of Elvis Presley fans streamed into Memphis today, hoping
Elvis Presley died, and 31-year-old Jane Jordan was living alone in an apartment on Key Street in Maumee.
Jane worked at Jeep. I believe she was a material handler. She lived at Lakeview Shores for a time. She was not a long-term resident. She did not have a lot of family in the area. She was raised by her aunt and uncle. Her parents died at a young age. She was from Indiana, the Huntington area, and was married in Indiana back in 1964. At some point, her and her husband moved here to Northwest Ohio, and they got a divorce in 1971. She had two kids, a boy and a girl, and they primarily lived with Dad at the time.
But that's where most of the information about who Jane Jordan was and who was in her life stops. And all that's left is in these documents about her murder.
On October 18th, 1977, a foreman at Jeep requested that one of the employees go check on Jane.
She hadn't been to work in about 3 days. That employee went to go check on her. Police reports showed Jane's coworkers at Jeep, Raymond Luce and Robert Tilley, went to Jane's apartment. The door was unlocked and they found her dead.
They contacted police. It was reported to police that there was a suicide. Police responded, very quickly determined that it was in fact a murder.
Very clearly a murder. Jane was brutally stabbed to death in the bathtub, blood on the walls and in the toilet, a large stain on her bed just across the hall.
Somebody was exceptionally upset with her. That's what I'll say.
Tilly, one of those coworkers, is dead.
Hi Raymond, this is Melissa Andrews from
But 11
WTOL.
Investigates did speak to Raymond Luce. He refused to say anything except that he only went to check on Jane with her boyfriend he named as Robert Tilley. The report states Tilley told an officer he last saw Jane 5 days earlier when she left his apartment. Both Tilley and Luce were questioned and fingerprinted by police.
Police will tell you most often investigations like these look at the people closest to the victim as the possible killer, but neither of these men was ever charged. It may surprise you all these years later who police want to talk to.
Life in Point Place these days is pretty simple for Kristen and Artie Richter.
Come on.
But nearly 6 years ago, their world exploded.
I felt like my whole life had just been ripped away from me. It had been ripped away from me. my security, my whole everything was gone.
I should have never went out that night. I should have just went home.
But he didn't. On January 31st, 2018, Richter and his uncle, Daniel Vasquez, decided to go out for a drink.
My uncle said, hey, let's go down to Brad's place. Brujas used to be called Brad's.
At some point, Richter, his arm in a sling from rotator cuff surgery, began arguing with a man named Carl Wimpy. And the argument turned physical. Wimpy hit Vasquez with a left hook. Richter's 59-year-old uncle was knocked out and never regained consciousness. He died 4 days later. Believing he instigated the fight, a grand jury indicted Richter on one count of inciting to violence, a third-degree felony.
I thought this was a joke. I'm going, this is insane.
I didn't really think a whole lot of it.
So I had hired an attorney, and he had come to me and told me that he could probably get me a F4 attempt to commit an offense. And I said, an attempt to commit an offense of what?
Then, according to the Richters, prosecutors threatened to re-indict him for complicity in the commission of murder.
I figured if they had enough evidence to do that, they would have done that in the first place. They're just threatening him. No way. We will not take a plea deal.
But then he was re-indicted on June 25th, and on September 18, 2018, a jury found Artie guilty of both charges. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison.
The verdict come back within 2.5 hours. So that quick of a verdict, I assumed that yes, I'm going home, it's over. When the guilty verdict was read, I said, I'm in complete shock.
He called me on the phone, and I was standing outside of the courtroom, and all we could say is, oh my God, what just happened? Oh my God, what just happened? I used to always be the positive one, and when they read that guilty plea, I lost all hope there. Bit of a nervous breakdown. Yeah, went through a lot from it. He didn't lose hope, and I'm so grateful for that, because I did.
That hope was rewarded on December 31st, 2019, when the 6th District Court of Appeals vacated not only the incitement conviction, but also the complicity to murder conviction. In its decision, the court wrote, "The state has failed to introduce sufficient evidence to support a conviction for the crimes with which the appellant was charged." Though the court found Richter's action troubling, the justices indicated that prosecutors dramatically overcharged the Toledoan. Appellant's conduct would fit squarely within the parameters of disorderly conduct, a 4th-degree misdemeanor punishable by no more than 30 days in jail. Richter, however, lost more than 2 years. Next month, he could make Lucas County legal history. He's filed a civil suit against the state, accusing them of wrongful imprisonment. Now, if he wins, he could become the first person in Lucas County to be compensated for being wrongfully convicted.
This isn't about compensation, really. It's more about righting the wrong and standing up to the system for what they do. It's never been about money, it's been about standing up to them. Because they do this to so many people. They could do this to you, they do this to you, they'll do it to anybody.
Kristen says she's stronger, but still healing. Artie says his anger is mostly gone.
Come on. Come on. I found peace. It took a long time to find peace. You know, I seen a meme that says, what did peace cost? It cost me a lot. Financially, you know, my freedom, this, that, but at this point, I found peace in all of this.